It is now my absolute pleasure and honour to introduce our first guest, Fiona Benson. Fiona was educated at Trinity College, Oxford, and then St Andrews University, where she completed her MLit and PhD in early modern drama. She was a Faber New poet and has written 3 collections, all from Cape. Bright Travellers received the Seamus Heaney Prize for First Collection and the Geoffrey Faber Memorial Prize. Vertigo and Ghost won both the Roehampton and the Forward Poetry Prizes. And her 3rd collection, Ephemeron, has just come out this year. She lives in mid-Devon with her husband and their 2 daughters. Michael Longley writes that Fiona Benson has created her own soul space with moving and unsettling poems about life's precarious beginnings and inevitable endings. She explores central themes of sex and love, birth and motherhood, often exploring them through myth or the natural world. So welcome, Fiona, and I'm now going to invite you to read a poem from Ephemeron, if you would.
Thank you so much, Mary, and thank you so much, Red Door Poets, for inviting me today for this interview. I'm going to read a poem from a sequence about Pasiphae that's in Ephemeron, and the sequence imagines that the Minotaur is instead a disabled child that Pasiphae chooses to keep and raise against the customs of the day, which would have been to expose disabled children and sometimes unwanted girl children, or just generally unwanted children. So this is Ariadne's perspective on her brother, the Minotaur, who is called Asterios, which means starry one. Ariadne on Asterios's imprisonment in the labyrinth. Most people couldn't understand him. You had to listen. He had a way of speaking, some sounds, some signs, give, please, help, and usually about our mother, mine. Ma was mother, obviously. He called me Ni. He'd tilt his head if he wanted to be petted, could sway it for a no and nod for yes. Sometimes he was rough, but I could manage him. The trick was to kick him behind the knees and he'd fold like a pile of blocks. We had a sign for sorry. You patted your chest. Sometimes I find myself patting there still, that blighted, sorry place, as I apologize to him, lost in that faraway, forgetting zone. After his imprisonment, I'd lead him out at night. Daedalus showed me the way, the concealed door, the lock, the thread. At first, my brother would run like mad ahead of me along the path, head down, making his noise for happy, tacking back and forth. Often we went to the beach and swam in the dark, the water firing all round us with tiny phosphorescent sparks. He'd spout the water out of his mouth like a joyous black-furred dolphin. When he was tired, he'd lie on the damp sand and watch the extravagant sky, a little noise for each slipped star, the Milky Way reflected in his eyes. For months, it was enough. But we are grandchildren of the sun. It sickens us not to feel its blaze. After a while, I could barely coax him out at night. And when we sat, all he would do was rest his head against his knees and slump and rock. Then he became so thin he could barely walk. I'd lead him tottering out and he'd sink to the ground, too weak to make the beach. He stank of piss. I was afraid, but couldn't think of how to get him free. I made excuses to visit less and was ashamed. One night, he turned his face to me and tilted so I'd stroke his cheek and sign the words slowly, clearly. I heard them plain as if he'd placed them singly in my brain. Want, die. And then he made the sign for help. Brother, look at me now. I'm signing sorry. It took me months to say yes. It took me years to find a way. And by the time he came with his swagger and deceit, looking under his eyelashes at our sister Phaedra, you'd lost all speech. You were eating your own feces. You didn't know me. You didn't know yourself.
That was wonderful and so moving, Fiona. Thank you very much.
I'm a bit out of practice reading poems. It's been a while.
No, that was so moving. And I'm very interested in your use of Greek myth to to explore really difficult and taboo issues, both with the retelling of the Minotaur in Ephemeron, and also with in Vertigo and Ghost, when you're discussing rape and using Zeus as representative of male power. And I wonder, have you always been interested in Greek myth, or how easy was it for you to find a way to write about taboo subjects such as this?
I was thinking about that, about where this interest in myth comes from, and I had this big book when I was little, the Greek myths, and I think for me it was like any other storybook. Really, I loved reading, and that was one of the books that I loved, and it had this kind of array of myths. You still get that kind of book for children, a kind of compendium of slightly sanitized myths, and I guess that's where it started. I don't really have a classical education, although I did do Latin GCSE, and my Latin teacher was lovely. And the bit I loved most was when he would tell stories to the class. So, but I think I don't, in our culture, we kind of tend to think of the Greek myths as something erudite and special. I don't think of them as that way. I think of them in the same way that you might think of folk tales or fairy tales. They're kind of things that we can play with and use as frameworks for investigating things that are happening in our world.
I mean, it's reading them. It brought to mind sort of echoes very distantly of Anne Carson or Alice Oswald, who do similar things. But you do it from a modern day feminist perspective. I wonder if are those poets important to you?
Yeah, well, I love Anne Carson. She's one, and Alice Oswald, I should say. And I think Anne Carson is using quite a feminist perspective, and is. Yeah, but I mean, Anne Carson is incredibly ambitious in the scope of what she does. It's in something like Autobiography of Red, you have this huge narrative that is built upon these very tiny fragments from Stesichorus, and I think, she's a real genius and an inspiration for lots of us. And the same with Alice Oswald. I think, something like is it Tithonus, that kind of long sequence in falling awake. It's so radical, and the way she uses form in that, with kind of dots for the seconds ticking over, and this kind of amazing narrative of the dawn in love with this very old man now who can't die. I think what she does with it is incredible, and it makes it very new and very very wonderful. Yeah,
it's very effective, isn't it? I'm also struck by the fact that myths rarely have happy endings. That there can be a feeling of possibly of entrapment. That the woman is trapped, Pasiphae is trapped. It's a bit like the butterfly on your front cover. I don't know if anyone, those who haven't seen it, you must get a copy, by the way. A butterfly looks as if it's trapped in a spider's web or something. And so, I mean, and the title itself, Ephemeron, suggests passing moments. The mayfly, with its species name Ephemera, but only lives for one day. And with words like "it is time" repeated in the book. And so I find it's really interesting how poets find a way into their subjects. And were insects also always important to you?
I I think so. Well, yes and no. I mean, I I've spent some time in countries where cockroaches are a thing. There's a reason there's a cockroach poem in there because I really don't like cockroaches. But I am very interested in the natural world in general. And I think that comes from my mum, actually. My mum has always been very interested in um, flowers and insects and birds.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And did you come from a literary background? I mean, did the poetry find you, or was it always around you?
Yeah, that was something that I was thinking about recently because Joelle Taylor's just done an interview in The Moth, hasn't she? And she said something like, we should always be talking about class when we're talking about poetry. And I don't actually agree with that, but I do relate to what she says about like poetry just isn't something that is done. Like it's not a career. It's not something you can do for work. It's not something that proper people should be doing. And that is kind of my experience. So my parents come from working class backgrounds, and my dad was in the RAF, so there's a lot of social mobility. My mum's a primary school teacher, so there wasn't like poetry around. It wasn't a literary background. My mum taught primary school music, so she was quite musical. But certainly the idea of being I mean, I wanted to be an artist to begin with. I wanted to be a visual artist, and my dad's attitude to that was absolutely not. You cannot make a living. And now we kind of joke about it because now I'm a poet, and you can make even less of a living as a poet. So yeah,
Yeah, no,
but certainly love of nature from my mom, and yeah, and my dad always had books around. They just, they weren't poetry books, but there were books.
yeah, no, that's wonderful. And I noticed that when you talked about your "Mama Cockroach, I Love You" poem, I love the way it ends. Someone must care for the dirt. I think that's so real, and there's a sense of the sort of transformation and carpe diem with all of that. And there are many references also, because insects often live for just a short time, to death and at the same time desire, as if life, death, desire. Is this at the transformative aspects of it all, and the petit mot you have from French for the French for orgasm, and the way that Pasiphae says desire makes beasts to be ridden of us all. I wonder if there's something transformative you see in life, death, and desire being part of something altogether bigger, a sort of spiritual component.
Um, that's a big question, Mary.
Just in an answer, just in a sentence.
Well, I mean, that is fascinating with insects, in that for a lot of them, their final instar, we think of mayflies only living for a day, but actually that's their final instar has a day. They have a couple of years under the water as a larvae, but then they have to get out, and they have a very brief amount of time to have sex and lay eggs and die. And I think I found that kind of very pressurized moment very interesting. And I think, yeah, I guess I do see those. I mean, I do see kind of spiritual element to the life of the body, and and passing on life to children seems a very, I don't know, potent thing and important thing to me. I'm not sure that's answering your question exactly.
No. I think that's great. It's so when I read your poems, particularly if I'm reading a collection in one go, and especially if I'm reading about motherhood mother-children relationships, as you're talking about, or boarding school, or all of these things, I develop a sense of quite high anxiety, as if nowhere feels very safe. You in one of the boarding school poems, you say love is culpable, and something about go on hiding when the game is over for years and years. And we get the sense of mothers clutching their children, running, wanting to go home, desperate to keep their babies safe. And yet when Pasiphae goes home, everyone she loves has left or died. And there's something that feels very full of powerlessness, especially for women, and abuse. So I'm thinking of that stunning line in Synchronous Fireflies. I came for the light, but it was the dark that kept me safe. and the echo in glowworms, some things you can only find beyond the light. So I'm wondering if you could say something maybe about this, about
Mm.
safety and the dark, the safety of darkness.
Yeah, I think, um, from a personal perspective, there's been times in my life when I haven't been safe, and I think that makes its way into into the
Mm.
poems. But also, it just seems to me that women um, are often not safe in this world. Like, I mean, right now with um, what's going on in the world right now, women can't protect their children because you can't, when you're being bombed, you can't protect your children, or the women in the world who can't get food for their children. It just seems like a basic human right to be able to care for your children and bring them up safely and healthily is not available for many, many women in the world. And I think that really, and not just women, it's not just women that are parents, it's, men and women who can't bring up their children safely and healthily. And that seems awful to me. And I think our priorities are completely messed up and, in this world. And I think that's probably a preoccupation generally. Um, and that poem that you mentioned about the dark, that kept me safe, that's a love poem for my husband, who is a very safe point in my life. Yeah, so that's kind of a love poem. I think love
Yeah.
sometimes happens in the dark, doesn't it? So maybe that's a good.
That is very and that is a very moving one as well. I mean, and I was struck by the ones with the anxiety that it ends with this image of your daughter finding razors, and how utterly terrifying that is. And
Yeah.
so yes, I do understand your position here. But it also makes me wonder about how much does personal experience inform your writing, and the relationship between the narrator and the poetic eye. How important is this for you or for any poet to, to be be able to write from personal experience?
I mean, I think it's everybody's choice, isn't it? I've people's like lately I've been asked about this, like how do you keep yourself safe when you're writing the poems? And actually I think it's the other way around. I think the poems keep me safe and they are my way of dealing with things. Um, and I think I've always admired poets like Sharon Olds and Mark Doty, who are very open. And I kind of think we're coming back to the insect thing. Life's too short for me, in my opinion, to be anything but open. I think humans spend a lot of time kind of not telling the truth.
Yeah.
It just feels like life's a bit short for that, and maybe I should just tell the truth and be open. I mean, where I find that difficult is when the people that I'm close to kind of can see it. I'd rather just tell the truth to strangers, quite frankly.
Yeah. No,
But yeah, but
no,
that's
I think that comes across really strongly. And I felt one of the ones where it was particularly struck me was your honesty in when you're writing about taboo subjects like teenage desire, for example, in Boarding School Crush,
yeah.
when your friend bears, or the narrator's friend bears her breasts, and the narrator writes, "I wonder at her blazing beauty and the bravery of her invitation." And I found myself wondering about your bravery in writing this, and how important it is, which you've just sort of said, that poets need to be brave in their writing.
I did get into trouble with my mum for that one, Mary. I don't know if I'd mentioned that to you. There was big trouble. Yeah, it's funny because, I've written about other taboo subjects and it's not been a problem, but that one was a big trigger.
Maybe it struck a chord or something.
I don't know, but I was in the doghouse for quite a long time.
Yeah. Oh, so I was also struck because when I was sort of doing a bit of reading around, I found that the subject matter for your PhD was the figure of Ophelia in early drama. And so here was a figure with no mother to guide her, and she was prey to male fantasies, the eternal virgin, the steadfast mother, and a sexual object, while she herself was caught between both the contradictory expectations and trying to think for herself, ultimately not with a great end result. So I wondered how much this is an ongoing question for you, because I sort of felt there were perhaps repercussions in some of the sense of the feeling in some of the poets. And I remember what Ted Hughes said, that he always found himself addressing the same underlying question. And if you feel that is true for you, and maybe for all poets, maybe we all do that. Do you think that's still going on there?
I'm not sure, Mary. I think, I don't know. I don't actually, I know this is very ignorant of me, but I don't actually examine my own process too deeply. I kind of want it to keep its mysteries. And I try and take things poem by poem and let them be their own thing. And I'm sure there are kind of undercurrents that are always there or there and maybe changing, but maybe it's best if I'm not too aware of them, or I might just get paralyzed.
That's no, and fair enough, and that's really interesting too. That maybe we just trust the process, and so another thought I had was what it was like for you to bring this book out in lockdown compared to your other books, and was there a different emotional impact of launching a book in lockdown?
Yeah, it's been a really different experience, and I'm not quite sure what to put that there are many things that could be put down to. It's a quieter book than my last one. It's not as sensational. Not that the last one was, but it kind of had rape as a subject, and that's easy for people to pick up on, and gets a strong reaction maybe. And it might just, I said to my friend this question might come up, and I said, am I allowed to say that maybe this book just isn't as good? And she said, no, I'm not allowed to say that. But there is that. This might just not be as good a book, but it's been a lot quieter. And also, I'm an older, the first couple of books, you've kind of got that debut thing going on, and I'm getting slightly more established, but it's been a lot quieter, and in some ways that has been difficult, just because for all of us, you work hard on something and then you put it out there, and then nothing. And so that can be challenging, but I think actually doing the writing has always been the most important thing. So the fact that I've got other projects that I've been working on of my own, and also a couple of commissions, and kind of being involved in other ideas and other things has been really helpful.
Yes, for sure. I mean, it does include two very successful pamphlets in here, doesn't it? Or sort of the insect love songs, and then the Pacifier. It's, although it might be quieter, it's also it's got a lovely resonating beauty to it. So I'm just wondering about your personal resources and poetry tools for dealing with something. If I sense that there's possibly a slight element of disappointment, and that's something that most poets could align with, because from personal experience, disappointment all the time, from maybe not being accepted by this magazine or winning that or whatever. So I wonder what are your personal resources and poetry tools for dealing with things like this?
It can be really hard, can't it, Mary? Because it's something that you put all your heart and all your love into. So I think I was thinking about how it's partly about not being able to share your work or something that you've been excited with. And I taught a course with Liz Berry last term, and she does this thing where sometimes she makes little books with poems or makes collages out of them, and I think that's a really nice way of kind of making something out of a poem or out of a little sequence of poems that is a thing. It kind of takes the emphasis away from publishing, or if you've got a poem that you haven't been able to get published, maybe you can make something else with it. I really like that idea. Make a collage with it, or
that's such a beautiful idea. I love it.
Yeah. So or Liz's idea. I should.
Never mind. It's your idea now.
But then also things like I do online yoga with Adrienne. Does anybody else do online yoga with Adrienne? Yay! Hi, Anne. So she always says, she makes you think of things you're grateful for. And there is so much to be grateful for. And I'm really grateful for just being able to write at all, because that's such a fun way to spend time. Well, I can't think of many things I'd rather be doing. So
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. That I don't know that group. So, I mean, do you belong to feedback groups or creative writing groups?
yeah,
How's your
Carrietta's here today. I'm in a group with Carrietta. I can't see her right
Ah,
now, but yeah, we have a workshop group.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and
And yeah, sorry.
I also had thought that also you should always eat cheesecake.
That's
when
good.
those prizes and things, if I go with my husband, we make sure that there's some kind of cake at home for when I get back
I
afterwards.
love it.
That's got rules.
Wonderful.
Cheesecake.
That's brilliant. And so, where is your writing going from here? Can you say, or are you taking some time out to just mull and think?
I've been working on some kind of folklory, witchy things that I'm
Oh,
quite enjoying. I don't know what they'll come to, but some kind of herbals and some stories
oh,
about witches.
well, I mean, there's lots of herbal references in the Minotaur sequence in the middle of this, which I absolutely adore. So if you're developing that, yes, please. It sounds great. Um, okay, so I think that's probably most of the things that I had down on my list. Oh, just one final thing, which is you've mentioned Sharon Olds and Carson, Alice Oswald, and I noticed there's possibly a slight nod to Rilke in "I Do Not Deserve This Life" in your Mosquitoes, Mozambique.
Mm.
Um, are there any other poets who particularly are go-to poets for you? Or
Yeah, Lucille Clifton for
oh,
sure.
mm,
Um, I'm blanking now. There are loads and loads.
okay.
Um, Gerard Manley Hopkins, and yeah, all
Mm.
sorts of poets that I love, and contemporaries like Liz Berry, and yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Fiona, for your time and generosity answering these questions. And I wonder if you'd like to read us one more poem, and then would you be up for answering a couple of questions if anyone's got them?
Yeah, that's fine. Shall I read? I thought because we were talking about the glowworms a little bit, weren't we, in the
Oh, I
dark.
love that. Mm,
I'll read the first one.
thank you.
Love poem Lampyridae, glowworms. The female born again with little changed, except she has no mouth and may not eat, except she has this urge to climb, this light she must raise and twist. The male born again with little changed, except he has no mouth, except he has this urge to search and wings. Oh, she must twist and turn her tail's green fire like bait, its little stab of brightness in the night, and he must search with wings through troubled air to find her pinhole lure, its single green seducing star. All night she signals him in. Come find me, it is time and almost dawn. All night he looks for her in petrol stations, villages and homesteads, the city's neon signs. Where are you? It is time and almost dawn. Once were humans, wandered in the lanes, led astray by fairies, foxfire, who found their stranger selves and brought them home. Now the dark is drowned, but some things you can only find beyond the light, and it is time and almost dawn, and love, my love, there is no finding then.
That's truly beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Fiona, for this most wonderful interview. Now, I'm throwing it open now to the audience. If anybody would like to, here's Carrie. Carrie, I can hear you. Would you like to unmute and ask your question?
I think I just put up the hand clapping signal, but I do have a question if you like. This is perhaps
you don't have to make up a question.
No, I was thinking this, but I thought it was, perhaps a bit lame. And it was about how has your process changed over time?
Yeah.
Are there different things that you're trying to accomplish in a poem as your kind of work has evolved, or I guess those are two separate questions. So choose the one you like.
Okay. Yeah. Well, because I've always just kind of got a little bit of something and then written it out and written it out and written it out. But actually, recently, Sophie Herxheimer, I really love her work and I love the way she collages. So sometimes now I've started doing little collages in my book of words and bits of picture and then using that as a first draft. So that's been quite a different change. And I've also started drawing in my book again. I didn't draw for years and years, and I'm being a bit more, I've always thought that's a bit naughty to draw in your writing book.
It sounds like it sounds like the process has become more playful.
Yeah, I think so. Just recently, I think, just trying to play a bit more with it and indulge my inner child, as they say, a little bit more. Yeah.
Thank you.
That sounds like a very wonderful thing to do. Very important, playfulness and joy. Are there any other questions? I'm sorry about that, Carrie, but it's a great question, so thank you. I can't see any more. Has anyone got any more or not? Because if not, then I might invite you all to unmute and give a thunderous round of applause to Fiona for this most wonderful interview. Thank you. And
thank you for having me, and thank you for joining. Oh, there's somebody from Zimbabwe here. That's amazing. Hello.
Wow. Not me. Who's there?
Incredible.
Bye. Goodbye.
And if you haven't got Fiona's book, check out the chat, get the links and get the books because they are wonderful.